Hey everyone, I got a great show for you today. I got Jared Garfield with me, who's been doing some really impressive things in real estate for a long time. So we're gonna sort of tear that apart, understand what he's doing now, how he's helping others. We'll also dive into his story and then look at what he looks to be doing in the future. So welcome to the show, Jared. How are you?
Thanks, Michael. I was doing a little bit better before you said that I had been doing this for a long time with the emphasis on long.
Yeah, well, you and me both, brother. We've both
That's
been
all
in the
right.
game
I have
long.
a lot more stories to tell because of it, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Stories, scars, whatever, one or the other. It's all fun though. So why don't we just jump in? Where do you want to start? You are doing literally so much in the business today. Where do you want to start?
Well, I guess you said you wanted me to talk a little bit about how we got started. It's kind of funny for me. I could say that I started in my early 20s when I was in college. I started buying my first investment properties. The first one we bought, we made about $42,000 on a flip where I would drive for dollars and drive up and down the streets and stuff like that. But it actually started before that. Before I bought the first house and flipped it, I bought a Carlton Sheets no money down course where they wanted to sell me $4,000 worth of coaching. And I ended up getting them down to sending me all of the tapes. And that tells you how old I am. It was on tapes and not CDs. And and I got all the tapes and all of the materials for $99, and that helped a lot. But it started really before that.
Wow.
When I was about 7 years old, I used to go over to my grandfather's real estate office. He had been the president of the Utah Board of a Realtors Association for the whole state. And he was kind of a living legend. He had a Cessna plane that he used to take me to fly all over to look at land deals all across the state. And he had owned part of the Hotel Utah, and he had opened the first self-serve gas station west of the Mississippi. He had done Class A apartments with 800, 900 doors and stuff like that. And when I was 12 years old, and I just really loved him a lot. He'd done so many cool things. He had a Victorian mansion with 8 bedrooms that was just really cool, very historic. But when I was 12 years old, we got the call that he had died of a heart attack.
Oh no.
And that happened because of this Class A apartment complex he had built in I think it was in Price, Utah. And Price was a huge coal mining town. And what happened is the federal government in 1986 had changed legislation regarding the burning of coal. And so overnight, the coal mines lost, just tons and tons of money. And they started shutting down mines or going to half operation because they weren't selling coal. And coal miners made good money. And all of his apartments were built to cater to all the coal miners because there was so much demand for the housing. So he went to 2 of his business partners and basically said, guys, I know that I'm going to take a big hit on this. If you want, you can sign everything over to me. I will take the whole loss for everybody because I'm going down no matter what. And he died of a heart attack at 62 years old.
Oh no.
So I got one of his real estate signs when I went to his funeral, and I kept it in my room on my wall, and I would read everything I could. I'd read Inc. magazine. I'd read everything I could on real estate investing. And so I kind of got started from a really early age, shadowing him and wanting to be like him. And what I realized was that if you didn't understand economic cycles and know when to get in and when to get out, that real estate could make you a lot of money. Because he had been a millionaire. He had a lake cabin. He had a beautiful Victorian house, an airplane. He had done very, very well, but then he lost everything. And my grandmother had been, they were about 6 or 8 payments away from having their home paid off,
Wow.
but they had put it up as security for the apartment complex. So she ended up being unstable in her later years, even though he had been a millionaire. And I just thought it's amazing that real estate can create such great fortunes, but at the same time dash you if you don't obey the rules.
Yeah, that's a great story, and frankly something that obviously is very core to your being and you're holding with you, which is having that with you is always good because it keeps you probably always asking yourself questions. And I bring that up because you like me, whether you feel it or not, we hear people saying the real estate cycle is changing, right? I experienced, right? I started in '03 through the '08 crash, survived, prospered because I got out, right? Moved to apartments, all that stuff, as you'll read about in the book. But a lot of people didn't. I saw people worth $10 million 9 months later be bankrupt because real estate, if you stay in too long or it gets a little too crazy, and you finance with your name and it's all that kind of back end debt, it can get you. So it's interesting to hear you tell that story, and it be really core to you. So I guess I have to ask, what do you see going on right now? Because depending on who you read or who you talk to, they're talking about the real estate market, topping out at least.
Well, it's interesting. I don't believe all the hype. Some people are getting so, I read an article last week. They said, oh, we're in a terrible, abysmal trough. It really sunk in December. Housing sales are down by 10% in these four markets. And the month before that, they were down 4%. And the month before that, they were down 5%. And I was like, you know what? Being year over year down 10% on volume of sales is not some terrible, abysmal trough.
Yeah.
So is it time for correction? Yes. When you look at places like Seattle, San Francisco, there's no question that the prices have gone up so much that they can't keep going up forever. Yeah. But there's a lot of markets that are red hot right now where the inventory is still so low, because remember, there's so many builders who went bankrupt where we had almost no building going for 10 years. Yeah. We have an extreme housing shortage in so many markets.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, one thing you see me talk about a lot is real estate investing is obviously an emotional purchase for people, right? It's likely the largest purchase most people make, right? Most of us aren't buying apartment buildings and the like. So I get it, right? So what that means is when the press gets negative, even if it's silly statistics, right? Like we're talking about, oh, it's down 10%, or the one I like is, price cuts have quadrupled. Well, yeah, they went from 5 to 20. Right. I mean, what are we really talking about here, right? When you look at the raw numbers. But the point is when it's the business or the news cycle, CNBC, Wall Street Journal get negative, that makes people afraid, and then people get afraid, and it becomes this self-perpetuating thing. And then, of course, Seattle, the Bay Area, New York is, grossly overpriced. I live in one of those markets, right? I live in the Bay Area, and the condo, right? We live in this little shack of a condo is worth $500,000 more than it was at the peak, right, of 2008. So, right. And most people's incomes didn't go up 50%. So there are some markets that are ripe for a downturn.
New York City has gone, I've got a chart that tracks 278 markets all across the country. Yeah. I told you, it really had a big impact for me with my grandfather. Yeah. And one day I was coaching for Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I used to coach and train for him, and I'd train his coaching staff and things. And I heard a coach, and people were paying $20,000 and $30,000 to have 25 minutes a week with the coach's time. And what I heard one of the coaches say to a client in San Francisco, they said, oh, don't worry about it. You can make money in any market. Go get with a realtor that sells Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac foreclosures and go buy a foreclosure. And at the time, this was 2007, California had gone up 25% a year for 5 straight years. And I knew it was a market that was about to pop. I knew that Phoenix was the same way. Miami was the same way. But most of the rest of the country, I would have never have guessed that all the rest of the country would have crashed because of the mortgage-backed derivatives. But I have the statistics. And so it's very, very fascinating. Right now, New York has gone up 270% from the peak of the last bubble of, I think, March of 2007. It's 270% above the last bubble.
That's unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how else to say that.
You're right.
But the real point of all of this is, yes, there are some markets that you and I will both agree as experienced real estate people that are overpriced, unquestioned. But they are, I don't know, 5, 8, 10% of the national market. I believe there's lots of places kind of in the middle of the country, not on the coasts, not in Texas maybe, right? Because of taxes and their own real estate thing. But there are lots of cities that are great to invest in because builders went out of business, right? The mortgage meltdown had ripple effects, and it took out businesses, and businesses were builders and all of that. So we've had 10 years of near no building. So if you can get into affordable housing that's already built, buy it below replacement cost, stick in a tenant that's more than 1 time's rent, hallelujah, let's go, right? I mean, that's what I'm seeing kind of in the middle of the country. What about you?
Yeah, I agree 100%. In fact, right now, new home sales are the highest that they've been in many, many markets. I mean, right now, Houston, Texas is building 2,200 new homes a month. Dallas, just a little bit below that, about 1,800. Atlanta, Georgia is at about 1,600 new homes a month. And then just going on the list, Phoenix, Orlando, Tampa, Austin, Texas, Charlotte, North Carolina, San Antonio, Vegas, Denver, Raleigh, all of these markets, Nashville, Tennessee, Fort Worth, Texas, Washington, D.C., Riverside, California even. I mean, Riverside is still growing and booming. Jacksonville, Florida, Minneapolis. This is from CoreLogic. that they released today. New York City is still growing, and then Seattle, Washington is slowing. They're only doing about 500 new builds per month. So you can tell that the party's getting closer to over there. But there are a lot of areas that are growing. Right locally where I'm at, I'm doing a lot in Huntsville, Alabama, Birmingham, and Montgomery. Rents are up about $100 per month. Houses that were renting for $850 that you could buy a year ago for $90,000, they're now renting for $975. So rents are up. Prices are going up. The FBI just announced 4,400 new jobs moving from Quantico to Huntsville on the Redstone Arsenal base location. They've got rocket boosters now being built for SpaceX program there. They've got a new Toyota Mazda plant. So people are flocking to Huntsville, Alabama right now. So when people are talking about, hey, is it a bubble? There's markets like Huntsville that didn't start even coming out of the crash until about 2 years ago. And so many people are at different phases of the market cycle. You've got expansion, equilibrium, decline, and absorption. And some markets are actually started correcting, 2 or 3 years after the crash. And so it's different. It's all real estate's very local.
Oh, yeah. I would tell you that real estate's not only local, but even sometimes hyper local. But what you're bringing up is something I truly believe in. There are parts of this country, and again, I'd go as far as to say most of the country, certainly geographically based, is not going to see much of an impact from this quote unquote real estate slowdown or whatever you want to call it. The statistics are going to tell you there's been a haircut, but that's because the highest price markets are going to come down 10, 15%. And just math says if you take out, I don't know, X dollars from the top, the average gets smaller. That's just how math works. But again, I mean, you talk about Alabama in general, you rattled off 3 cities. That state's growing, right? It's attracting investments from big corporations, SpaceX, the FBI, Toyota, and you're seeing rent growth, right? That's 100% rent growth, right? You go 850 to 975. That's more than 10% rent growth, not 100, sorry, 10% rent growth. And I'm seeing that in my market in Fresno, right? Property that we used to get $995 for are now $1,200, right? And we're in California, but it's 2.5 hours kind of away from the Bay Area, central part of the state, not near the water. So it's a place where you can live and make 50 grand a year. But all that stuff's going on. And people need to realize, investors that watch my channel need to realize that, every place isn't the Bay Area. Every place isn't New York or Orange County. You need to look for providers that have something to offer. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many markets right now. I'm doing a ton of stuff. We're doing things in South Bend, Indiana, where you can buy a duplex that's bringing in $1,600 a month for $129,000, a mile and a half to Notre Dame University. We're doing stuff in Kansas City. We're doing stuff in Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, a little bit in Atlanta, and stuff like that. There's a lot of markets right now that are just really red hot. Kansas City is doing well. We've done some stuff in Milwaukee. There are a lot of great markets where the returns are still hitting double digits, 15, 18% cash on cash returns are not unheard of. So there are some really good opportunities.
Well, I think we haven't really mentioned it yet. Let's do it now. Let's talk about your company, what you provide. We've talked about the markets and what's being provided, but I think we've kind of skipped a step. Let's talk about your company. And again, part of that, you're doing lots of things in lots of places that I said earlier. So let's shout out your company and what you're looking to provide folks with.
So we've done about $57 million in renovations on properties, about 300 different homes. We've done some $800,000 flips recently, a $4 million flip in Napa, California, actually. So we do some stuff even in the California market. But right now we're developing 1,800 lots in the Colorado Springs market. It's 1,800 acres, rather. And mixed use, a bunch of subdivisions. We're developing the water systems and everything there. We've got a couple subdivisions going in Georgia, and then we're doing turnkey properties that are totally renovated. We'll buy a property for $35,000, $40,000. We're full disclosure. We say, look, we bought it for $35,000. We're putting $35 grand in rehab. We're into it for $75,000 with holding costs and financing fees, and you can buy it for $85,000, and it rents for $925 a month. That kind of thing. So we're providing anywhere between 10 and 15 properties per month right now to people who are looking for cash flow properties. They want to have the property fully managed with professional management, with everything done, completely, totally redone, like almost like a new house. I mean, they're not going to be completely brand new, but we're talking new kitchen cabinets, granite, plumbing in the bathrooms completely redone, bathrooms gutted to the studs. Really nice work. And a lot of times the entry points are between 85 and 130,000. So we're doing a lot of that right now.
Yeah, let's just give it a plug. We'll do it again at the end. But where would, I mean, I just went to your site while I was prepping for this. What's the site where they can go look at inventory you have and all that?
Yeah, if you're interested in turnkey, you can go to ROI. So ROI for return on investment, turnkeyproperties.com, or just ROITK to abbreviate it, ROITK.com. And you can see some of the projects that we've been doing in different states. And it's kind of fun. And if you go historically, we aren't doing much in Atlanta right now, but you could go click on Atlanta and see what we were doing 5 years ago. And you'd be amazed that we were buying 2007 houses for $55,000 that had last sold for $170,000. And we had clients that bought 6 and 8 houses and made $800,000, $900,000 in an 8-year run, just in appreciation. So if you get into the right markets, the right timing, you can do really well. And we've got a coaching program where we actually help people learn how to do it, choose the right markets, develop the teams, get the properties, and everything. And so it's really cool. And we've got a free report that kind of tells you the hottest markets. If you go to jaredgarfield.com/report, we give you the 10 markets that we think are the hottest cash flow markets for high return. And we also give you the 10 markets that we think are dangerous right now that you should probably run from. Markets like Salt Lake City and Denver and even Houston. Houston's been the darling for a lot of people, but we think the appreciation's gone up so much that we think the party is over, even though there's still growth, still population growth, not a great pace for cash flow. And we think it'll correct within the next 2 years.
Yeah, I would, again, I have no eggs in the Texas basket. So this is just coming from a guy who talks real estate all the time and has friends who have eggs in the Texas basket. It's tough to cash flow now because they reassess property taxes every year and they've been ratcheting it up. If you've been in the game 5 or 6 years, it was really good in the beginning, but now they've ratcheted up those property taxes. So cash flow is being squeezed and some people are upside down now. And they're like, they can have the property. So if that's happening with just a little noise that I'm hearing, right, it could be a sign for some trouble ahead. So just be careful in Texas.
And Michael, you bring up a good point. When you talk about property taxes, a lot of investors, when you're looking to invest out of state, whatever market you're choosing, you've got to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And there's 2 areas that people get into trouble with. One is the property taxes. People will look at like say Detroit. Michigan has like the 3rd highest property taxes in the country. That doesn't mean you can't do real well in Michigan. But what it does mean is if you see a $1,200 rent on a property you're buying for $105,000, you think, wow, this is great. It beats the 1% rule.
Right.
But what you might not realize is if that property costs $2,000 a year in property tax, and you could buy the same property, say in Huntsville, where the same property might only rent for $975, and you may purchase it for the same price, but the annual taxes were $700.
Yep.
That there's a big difference because the load that you're paying on the property tax burden, it could literally be $50 in one market and $200 a month in the other market.
Totally agree. And the other thing you got to watch out for, guys, he's giving you some real gems here, is watch how property taxes are assessed. California is great because I bought a lot of stuff during the crash that I bought for 50 grand or less. And good old Prop 13, knock on wood, as long as it's there, they can only raise that 3% a year maximum, right? So I'm going to be fine forever. But in Texas, they reassess every year. And, in 2008, we were looking for the next market and we went out to Texas, San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, almost bought some stuff in San Antonio, but realized when they can squeeze you every year, it's like, whoa, because we just unnaturally assumed that every place was like California, right? We had California eyes, and it wasn't until we got back home and asked some questions, we're like, whoa, it's different. So every state can be different. So watch out.
Some markets I've invested in are every 5 years. Another thing to look at that I think is important when you're investing out of state is you've got to compare demographics. When you're buying from turnkey providers, and there's some excellent turnkey providers, but there's 2 other things you got to look at if you're buying out of state. Number one is compare renovation scopes. Yep. And I always prefer to just be fully transparent. I think if you're buying a property from somebody, you ought to understand anybody who's going out and buying a foreclosure, fronting the money, paying the money to buy the property. They're investing and paying the points. They're carrying the holding costs, and then they're giving you a property that you couldn't have bought because the banks won't loan on a property in that kind of condition. If they're doing all of the heavy lifting, all the work for you, they're going to make a profit.
Yes.
But you should know, what is that profit? Are they making 5,000, 8,000, 10, or 20,000? And so I think people expect you to make some money, but just ask them, well, what are you making on this? What did you buy it for? What rehab? Can you show me the scope? And so, because you could look at one provider and they may say, well, I'm selling you this house for 90,000. Well, what if they did 10 grand in rehab and it was all cosmetics and it looks great, but the furnace is old, the condensing unit's old, the roof's got 10 years left on it or 5 years, and the hot water heater's 12 years old, whereas the other person might be charging you there may be a little bit of a different charge. It might be 5,000 more, but they may have done 20,000 more rehab where all of the systems are completely new. So compare rehab scopes and make sure that you see some level of transparency. And then demographics are huge. I can't believe how many people say, oh yeah, this is a C plus neighborhood. And then you say, okay, well, it's a C plus neighborhood. What does that mean? And they say, well, it's C plus, the pride of ownership, C plus. But then you go and dig into the demographics and you find that the median income is 26,000. You find that the vacancy rate's 20%. You find that the unemployment rate's 10%. And then you start going through the numbers and you're like, holy mackerel, crime's 5 times the national average. That's not a C plus neighborhood. So look at demographics.
Yeah, these are great gems for folks. And I'm talking to more and more people, right? I'm a California guy, Bay Area guy, and lots of people are going, it doesn't make sense here. I'm like, no kidding. So a lot of people are looking for turnkey providers. So some of the things you just dropped, I just want to reiterate. Please look at the scope of work, right? Because I have seen some turnkey providers go, hey, it's got new floor, it's got new paint. Oh yeah, don't worry about the countertop. Yeah, it's Formica, but hey, it's a tenant. Oh, the bathtub. Yeah, that's 10 years old or whatever. They're not even changing the toilets. I mean, Jesus. So, look at the scope of work. That's important because again, you're going to be out of state. And ideally you want to not think about it for at least a decade. Yes, you're going to have tenant issues and people will break windows and you'll have evictions and all of that stuff, but you don't need the house falling apart, right? Because that's where it gets expensive. So definitely look at scope of work. And if they hide anything from you or make excuses or try to tell you a story, just go to the next one. It's just not worth your time, right? People that I talk to have money, don't have time. So don't waste your time. And the other thing is don't get so wrapped up in somebody else's C plus opinion or whatever. I am not a big fan of people investing in markets they won't at least go visit, right? I've talked to many people that have said, I want to go invest in Cleveland or even Huntsville or Detroit or whatever. And they're like, I'm going to go give somebody $100 grand. I'm like, well, okay, great. What'd you learn? What'd you do? What did you see when you were there? Oh, I didn't go there. I'm like, what? You're going to give them $100,000 and you never freaking got on an airplane? Stop it, you crazy person. Go out there and see it because you just don't know, in my opinion. I think people need to go see it at once. You don't need to go see it 10 times, but get off your butt and go see the place.
Yeah, and it gives you the ability to build better relationships with your business team that's going to be there to help you. I also think some other tips. I think you want to try and make sure you have luxury vinyl plank that has a lifetime warranty that's waterproof. It costs about 50% more to put it in, so you're going to pay a little bit more, but that's so much cheaper than putting carpet in and replacing it after every tenant moves out.
Amen.
If you have to replace the carpet after the tenant moves out, you just ate a whole year's worth of cash flow. So make sure that you're doing it kind of more bulletproof. Like we put granite in every house, even if it's a C plus house, we put it granite in. And when I say C plus, I'm talking about 57,000 median income, 8% vacancy rates, stuff like that. C plus should be average, right?
Right.
An average student is a C student, and a good student's a B student, and an excellent student's an A student. So, so look at the demographics. Make sure you look at the rehab scopes. Try for luxury vinyl plank and high durable things like granite, because it's $200 more for granite than it is for laminate, but you can't put a pot on granite and burn it. You don't have granite swell at the seams if water gets on it. So, those kind of things are important. And then of course we said the demographics, and that's really crucial as well. But one of the things I would also be aware of is sometimes you'll see people advertise that it's cash only. They're only sell to you if you pay cash. Well, that's code for our property won't appraise. We're selling it to you for more than it's worth, so you can only pay cash because we know darn well we've been down this road before and it won't appraise.
Amen. Just again, if you're going to a turnkey provider and they're saying cash only and they tell you a story about, oh, lending is tight or they don't lend on this type or whatever it is, run away because that's a red flag for being overpriced for sure. Absolutely right.
Now there is one difference. Now there are markets, there are times where I have properties where I'll tell people up front, we want you to know that there may be some appraisal issues on this property. Many of the comps in this area are foreclosures,
Right.
and because we do an average of $35,000 renovation on ours, the comparable sales don't have new roofs, new furnaces, new condensing units, new hot water heaters. They have 10-year-old carpet, not brand new luxury vinyl plank. They don't have new kitchen cabinets. They don't have granite, and the appraisers are going to use those comps, and they aren't going to give us the full 35,000 renovation for it. So we want you to understand that it's possible that it may appraise 5,000 short, and we don't really have the latitude. So you may have to pay 5,000 more, but just understand it's much better to come 2 or 3 or 5,000 more out of pocket and have a little bit better return than to buy the property, put your down payment down, and 3 years later you're replacing a roof that will cost you 7,000 that I
Right.
could have gotten done for 3,500 because the guys work for me full time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, these are the things that you just have to watch out for, ask questions, and just, you know, keep asking more and more questions as you're talking to turnkey providers and all of that. So I love what we've done. We've talked about how you got started and all of that. I'm curious, as you sort of look out into the future, what do you see the next 3 or 5 years for your business? You're going to be in more areas, less areas? What's going on in 3 to 5 years?
So we're expanding to areas. What we're doing is we're going out and training a lot of turnkey providers and making sure that their rehab scopes are where they need to be and that they're producing the right kind of product. And we're going into markets where we can get 5 to 10 properties a month. Because at one point I was doing 40 homes a month. And we just got to where we can't get that volume anymore. And so what we're doing is we're assembling some of the best turnkey providers in the country. We're getting access to more, so you can diversify in different markets, but they meet the same standards. We've got a software that's about to launch called House Folios that analyzes all of the properties. It'll pull everything right out of Zillow, right out of the MLS, and then it'll rank them and kind of show you in order which properties are the best deals. And so it gives you the cap rates and the cash on cash returns and things like that. So that's cool. And then we're doing the new subdivision development because we think that it's great to keep the turnkey around because eventually the market will turn and we'll see more foreclosures again.
Sure.
But right now there's a housing shortage inventory. So we're doing new construction. One of the things we're doing is we're building with a concrete and metal frame system in Florida. And these homes are waterproof, termite proof, and hurricane proof to it withstands wind shear, I think up to level 3 or 4.
Wow.
And so we're just investigating that to build in the Panhandle down by Mexico Beach and Panama City that really got decimated. So that's something that's cool that we like. It has R values of R30, so your utility bills get cut in half.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool, and it's very green. So we're doing some of that, and then it's the coaching, teaching other people from what we've learned, how to be able to do this. So really enjoying it. It's kind of been fun.
Yeah, and again, somebody who's been in the business a while like me, you always find ways to figure out what's going on and going forward. Oh, did I lose you?